Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining our Google GTI webinar hosted by August Shell. For those of you not familiar, August Shell is a services-first company that also has our value-added reseller practice. So not only do we sell a lot of these solutions, but we also have the engineering support to stand them up and do long-term engineering engagements. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Tim Judy, who's going to be our SE handling our webinar today.
All right, thanks, Brian. Good morning. As Brian mentioned, my name is Tim Judy. I'm a solutions engineer with August Shell. I've been with August Shell for almost 4 years, and most of my day is spent helping customers find solutions for their challenges. And currently, my main focus is with Google and their security offerings. A little bit about my background. I spent over 20 years in the Marine Corps, retired as a Chief Warrant Officer 3, and for the majority of that time, I was doing counterintelligence functions, and most of that was on the cybersecurity side. So threat hunt, looking for close access attacks, which is fortunate because the topic of today's webinar is attack surface management and how you can use the Google Threat Intelligence platform to accomplish that function. So before we get started, just going to point out that everything that you're about to see is the property of Google. We're using a live Google Threat Intelligence platform, and the demo environment that we're going to be using was stood up for the purposes of demonstrating the capabilities of the platform. Nothing that we've done here was in production on a production environment as far as assets in use there. To set the stage, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, the Google Threat Intelligence is a platform with many different capabilities, but where did it come from? Google's been around for a very long time. You know, they scour the web. It is the search engine for the entire internet. So as part of that, a few years ago, they started to acquire security platforms, and that started with VirusTotal, and most of us are familiar with that. Again, this is not a history lesson, but essentially Google has acquired the capabilities and the expertise of Mandiant, which had a lot of threat intelligence information come from their incident response engagements, their human sources that they would have out in the world, and then acquired those capabilities and brought them into the Google security portfolio. Google already has owned VirusTotal for over 10 years, and the power of the submissions that the community provide and all the threat intelligence data you get from the malware and the IOCs was a separate entity. And by combining all three of those, you get Google Threat Intelligence there. So with all of those assets, you get, as the slide said, unrivaled global threat visibility. Not going to cover all these numbers, but there's over 20 years worth of threat intelligence data that your organization can use to help defend your assets, in this case for attack surface management. One of the capabilities that was specific to Mandiant Advantage Threat Intelligence was the attack surface management capability. And in order to leverage that, or the challenge that this platform is meant to address, is organizations have a very complex ecosystem. You've got cloud assets, apps, internal. Your employees are everywhere. Supply chain attacks started becoming prevalent. You have to start worrying about who you're doing business with and what their infrastructure looks like. If their infrastructure were to get compromised and you're somehow communicating with them, you have the potential for being compromised yourself. So a vulnerability that affects your partners can indirectly affect you depending on that relationship. So you have to find a way to get visibility into what is going on. So how do we do that? Back in the old days, you used to do manual. You would keep spreadsheets, lists of just CSV files of just things that you own, and then do your best to try to make sure you're secure. The better way is to have a platform like Google Threat Intelligence with the attack surface management capability to help you get ahead and maintain visibility on your attack surface. So there are other, as this became a major problem over the years, other platforms have come about, other solutions and technologies. I'm a little biased because of the background, but having an actual platform that is backed by intelligence is preferential to one that's just kind of seeing what's out there and scanning and bringing back whatever it sees. So in the case of uh, Google or GTI's attack surface management capability, it's backed by the threat intelligence. So what does that mean? Everything that is in the GTI platform usually has a score, and that score is based on the intelligence that the platform has brought in, risk ratings that have been put in there by analysts and analysis that have been conducted on it, and reporting that they've received. So that intelligence is now integrated with the attack surface management uh, module of GTI. So you're taking your threat intelligence, you're automating your asset discovery and management in the platform, and then what you get on the end of that is actual relevant operational data that you can use to prioritize remediation or yeah, to basically prioritize remediation of those assets. I mean, if something is out there and it's vulnerable, but based on what you're seeing across your third party or otherwise, maybe it is a critical CVE or critical vulnerability, but because of how your attack surface is postured, it may be lower on your priority for remediation. It just depends. That's where the analysis comes in. But because you're using the threat intelligence that is in the platform and the automated capabilities of the attack surface management tool, you're able to better prioritize, and it makes you more effective. So with that, that's my 2 slides for why you should be using or why you should be doing attack surface management with an automated platform, but specifically GTI's attack surface module. I'm going to get into the actual demo and use case walkthrough. And before I actually walk through that, I kind of want to set the stage of what we're going to be looking at. As I mentioned before, this is a live GTI instance. It is, it is assigned to August Shell. We're able to go out and manage our attack surface using this and leverage that intelligence. But for the purpose of the demo, we've stood up a demonstration environment where we're doing a non-production assets. And for that, I'm using 2 instances stood up in the cloud. This one, if for those that aren't familiar, DVWA stands for Damn Vulnerable Web Application. It is exactly that. It's just a web server that I've stood up in an environment, and it is intentionally vulnerable. In this case, you do have the ability to change the security level as I see here, but all of these on the left, from brute force, the insecure cache SQL injection attack, this is purpose built for researchers or anybody that's interested to learn how these attacks work, how to defend against it. But most importantly for our case is that for this server, they exist, and it gives us a target to actually leverage attack surface management in GTI to see what is actually vulnerable there and what the attack surface looks like. Sort of similar, just a different type or another server. It's based on cheese. It is a very vulnerable web instance. This one's actually hosted in GCP, or not in GCP, but it's a research tool, so you can go and request an instance through the website, and it will stand it up for you to go ahead and see what's there, just to kind of poke around. When I I wonder if there's any security holes in this. Well, we're gonna hopefully find out using the GTI platform. And then lastly, and it's not on the slides, or I don't have it up here, the only other asset that we're going to be looking at today is we're interested in um, domain squatting, typo squatting. So in this case, we did use augustshell.com as the seed, which I'll talk about later, but we've asked the platform to monitor for typo squatting on our domain name. So we're not actually, in this case, going out and you know and scanning these domains. It's just the fact that they exist. That's what we're interested in there. So out of the three use cases, that's the closest we come to actually anything actual production. But in this case, we're not actually reaching out to the domain. So starting with the homepage here of GTI, this is what you get when you log in. On the left, you see all of the different platforms. Last month, we did another one on the private scanning sandbox piece. In this case, for this one, we're doing attack surface management. So I'm gonna go here and start to the dashboard, and it takes us to the main screen here. In this case, this is actually not our demo environment that we're looking at. I need to actually go in and select a new project. But before I do that, I'm going to go into just kind of the hierarchy of how this is managed. So if you see on the right here, I've got 4 different projects that I've stood up and that we're actively using for this. The one I'm interested in is the attack surface management webinar one here. If you could, as you can see, the scope of the information that's displayed has changed. So the project we were looking at before, it was another demonstration that we had set up using other technologies. And now that I have actually gone into this project here, I'm focused in on what I spoke about earlier and what we're interested in. So high level overview of what it's seen. You've got your most severe issues, total issues, entities, technology that's seen, issues based on severity. We don't have anything here just based on the time that we've stood this up, but as you are using this platform for a long time, this will start to populate based on what it's seeing over time. Nice little geographic map here so that you can isolate anything that might not be in areas that you would expect to see, and then just by status. So nice little overview. Not too much particularly anything to dig into, but before we go into these other the meat of the module, I want to describe kind of the hierarchy of how this would work for an organization. So I mentioned these projects before. We're going to go in here real fast and look at all of them. So imagine you're a big organization, you've got multiple resources, you got many different analysts, researchers, threat hunters, red teams, whoever is going to leverage this for their operations. You can have multiple accounts for those people. They're going to want their own workspaces. So how do you manage that? The way you do it in GTI and the attack surface management is using projects. So for this, I've created this project, and now everything that I am interested in managing as part of that project is stored here. So I'm just going to create a test project here just to walk through the process, but it's fairly simple. I'll just say demonstration project. and then create. And it's as simple as that. So I've got a new project here. It's blank. When I select it, I will go into the next step will be to go into collections. And I don't have any collections because I just created a new project. And by doing that, as I go through my workflow, I will come in, create a collection. What a collection is just that, a collection of entities. In this case, are seeds. So what is a seed? Well, the seed is anything that you want to track. So I'm just going to create demo here. I'm going to walk through some of these later on the actual project we created for the demo, but for the purpose of this, just showing what is available and what you can track, I'll talk through these really fast. After you create the project and start a new collection, your next decision is how do you actually want this collection to be scanned? Your standard one is this, the external discovery and assessment. That's the one that's been around the longest in the platform. That is the basic function that you're looking for out of this. I want to give the platform some information of known assets that I want to track and discover vulnerabilities on and go out and scan for those. The rest, going down the list, you do have the ability to integrate with all the major cloud platforms, and that will, once you set up that integration, it will continuously scan that on the schedule that you set up for any vulnerabilities that might be present. You can do the code discovery, so GitHub and others, you can set that up to monitor for certain configuration settings that might not be safe, things like that. Suspicious domain discovery, we're going to actually talk about that when we get to the other collection for the actual demo here. And that's exactly what I said before. Just I'm going to put in my case, I put in augustshell.com, and it's going to go out and search for anything that might be malicious, in that it's trying to do some domain abuse type functions, trying to get people to click on certain things for phishing otherwise, but it's going to base that off of known goods, the information that you provided. Mobile app, focus exactly what it says on iOS and Android, so you have the ability to do your mobile applications. And the web application, we're actually going to look at that for the DVWA instance that I set up. So that's specific for going to a site and crawling it to see what's there, getting into the web pages and what the actual content of it was, and looking for vulnerabilities in that space. And then third-party monitoring. In this case, you're going to provide it as much information that you can for partners and mission partners. It could be just supply chain partners, vendors, distributors, and it will give you reporting based on their status. It's not necessarily going to scan them, but you can report back on what their posture looks like to help you make decisions on your workflows here. So in this case, we're just going to hit the external discoveries and put in my seeds. So in this case, I'm not actually going to fill this out, because we'll jump into the one I made prior. But from here, I would put in my seeds that I'm interested in. Let's go to the example.manny.com. You've got 1, 2, 3. There's over 7 different types of seeds that you can put in. When you start to type in your seed, it will do its best to change to detect what type you're putting in, because you do want to be accurate here. In this case, it knows that I'm putting in a web address. But if you're not specifically putting in any of the other ones, DNS rec or IP address, you can just put in a keyword and it will do its best based off of what you put in there. So after I filled this out, I could put in multiple seeds here, and all of those seeds will be scanned using this workflow. We'll see later that it's kind of best practice to possibly put the same seed in multiple different workflows just because of the way they work. But in this case, I'm not actually going to create this. I'm just going to go ahead and hit back and cancel out of it so that we can see one that's already been created here. So in this case, I'm going to the one we made. I've got 5 collections that I made perfect for this, and the way I filter this out is here. So I'm looking at if I want to specifically look at my DVWA issues, I can filter that here, or if I just want to look at the domain that I'm interested here, I can do that, and that changes what I'm seeing on my dashboards. So in this case, if I go to the DVWA, I see out of all of the collections in my projects that I've seen specific to DVWA, I've got 4 or 5 total issues that I should be looking at that. So just a way to help your research kind of make sure that they're looking at what they should be seeing. All right, so that kind of sets the stage for the platform itself, how to get up and running. Another thing I would mention is that projects can be control of who has access to that. So if you've got certain groups, if your red team needs access to a certain project, but you don't necessarily want your blue team or other or managers seeing their activities, you can control that based on username and accounts, and that way you get that OPSEC piece there, so that depending on what they're trying to get at, it just keeps that information contained where it should be. And now we get to the meat of the results. So the way we get these results is after I have created my project, I've created my collections, and I've started scanning. Here I get, this is the result here. And while I did forget to mention one thing, I wanted to jump in the actual scans here. So just to back up one just a little bit, I have created projects. I created my collections with all my seeds, and then part of that is setting up my actual collection for how I want them to scan. In this case, I've put it to wide open. I wanted to see everything. You're looking at this configuration here, issue settings, inferred CVEs. I've told GTI that based on everything it sees during these scans, I want you to tell me everything that could possibly be a vulnerability based on what information is brought back. I did not do it for this collection, but you can set custom policies based on information that it sees. So part of this collection, if I wanted to let's just pick doesn't really matter, but for all these vendors, this is a list of vendors that the platform has seen or is possibly out there. I'm going to tell it, if I see a Cleverbridge product here, I want you to to assign it a certain severity and do that for this specific collection. That's specific for this and no other collection entities. Really allows you to tailor your operations and highlight what you're interested in. Same thing for ports. So if I want to flag a certain port, we'll see this later. If I wanted to flag flag 23 as telnet as something that's severely critical, when it sees it, I'm going to assign it critical. Doesn't matter what it is. It will override anything that GTI, Attack Surface Management, has been programmed with, programmed with their scan settings. this is again just kind of high level. I said broad scoping. So again, I just made it as wide as possible. You see the caveat there, it says it may result in false positives, but because these aren't production servers, and even though they are highly vulnerable, I wanted to make sure that we had some data for us to look at here. Seed entities, these are the actual entities that I configured for this. So that screen where we created the project, created the collection, and we started to go through and add entities here. These are the ones that were added for this. In this case, I did both the DNS name for the vulnerable web application and the IP address there, just to kind of cover all my bases. And you can actually see that when I added this, it correctly identified that as just a plain IP address, and this is the actual URI here. Keywords, I didn't create any keywords for this, but if you did, you would see it there. Here I could set up integrations with my cloud environments or any other integrations that I might have. We're not gonna dive into this, but it's something later. If you want to contact us, we can help walk through this or talk through any specific use case that you have. And then groups of members, this is where I was just talking about how you can control access to this based on your organization and uh, their roles that are configured within GTI. So yeah, I'm not going to cover this, but you do have that ability here to do that. And lastly, the once you're all set up, there you go, you can scan on demand here. And so it's going to go ahead and rescan that, or within my collections, I can do that here. So these are all my collections. I can have it scanned daily, just on demand, monthly, weekly. And then anytime I'm just in here and I want to get an update, I can just quickly click the scan. But it does take it does take a different amount of time depending on the workflow that you picked, or how many seeds you have there. Sometimes refreshing this will show issues here, but then you'll come back later and you'll see more. So be a little bit patient when you actually initiate a scan. There's no set time. It just kind of depends on all of the context that you put into that collection here. But given a reasonable amount of time, it's going to cover everything. And when you come back, you'll be able to dive into the results here. So with that, kind of set the stage, we have all of our issues here. On the left, you see all the filters. We've got 29 open. I have not gone through and done anything with these, so there are no closed, and you get an idea of severity based on what we see there. We got 16 informational all the way up to 4 critical, and then a confidence level. One thing I'll point about confidence and just the way that these scans work is that there's a combination of active and passive scans, active and passive actions that are taking place in a scan. So one thing to be aware of, if you are using this, to say you are part of a red team, or there's a concern of actually reaching out and interacting with that entity, that domain or that IP address, this attack surface management in GTI will do that. So there is no true passive analysis here. So it's great for a bunch of different use cases, but if there's anything where you're concerned with monitoring or interfering with anything, you need to be aware of that before you put it into this platform here. And the reason why that's important is for the results, the confidence levels. You see 16 confirmed and 13 potential. Confirmed means that the platform, based on the workflow and the scan that was initiated, it has interacted with that entity and it has confirmed it through some form. Sometimes it can be just a port scan. So it went out, it interacted with the platform, said, I know that port 443 is open because I reached out, and here's the results of that, and it is confirmed. Potential, we'll see potentially here how that came about, if I can find a good example of it. But potential means that it has reason to believe that it is actually present, that vulnerability or that condition, but it did not actually physically or virtually verify that with an action. So it's based on the threat intelligence that it has and conditions that we're seeing there that potentially exist, but it's not going to confirm that for you there. So we're going to click on the first one here. So for the first inferred CVE, this one is a potential. So as I mentioned, it has not actually confirmed this there, but it gives you a description of the issue, improper encoding or escaping output. I have not seen this CV prior to this demo, so if I don't know anything about it, it gives me a high level description of what it is here. I can dig into the references, and it will actually point me to the vulnerability there, and anything that is used to assign the score to, and just any information that it has is going to be listed here as a reference. And then the proof. So this is specifically telling us why it's a potential. So based on its fingerprinting of the actual system, when it did its scan, otherwise it noticed artifacts that pointed towards the certain version number there, 2458. You're able to copy out the JSON of those actual results and use that in other platforms if need be. This is actually JSON for the entire results here. But if you have an integration, you want to manage this in some other platform, you do have the ability to integrate there and go through. So this is all of the data that we have on this CVE, and from here I can go and say, okay, now I have triaged this. Other analysts or other people on my team will see this. We can send emails. We can send it to email, alert somebody else. I can write notes in here for myself there to come back. Other groups will be able to see those comments and have a nice workflow. And then if I need just a little bit more information, if I wanted to dive in to see how the actual threat intelligence that's in the platform for this CV, I can actually click this and it will take me to the specific CVE in this is actually outside of the attack surface management platform. You can see it's coming to here, so I can actually dig into more of this, like how do I what products are actually vulnerable, how can I potentially fix this, what exploits are actually in the wild for that, and then history in there. So because it's all in one platform, we're able to extend our attack surface management operations into the rest of the platform and pivot to other relevant modules there. So jumping back into the platform, I've got I said 29 issues were triaged in those. I can filter there. So those are my issues. What about entities? So I've identified all the issues. What other entities were identified as parts of these collections? So if we remember, I only put really three assets, three seeds into the platform. I put in my DVWA, my cheese vulnerability website, and I put in our August Shell's domain to look for typo spying. And based off of that, we found 21 entities. So the definition of an entity, as far as the results that we've seen, is anything that is related to those seeds. In this case, I'll just pick on the first one because I've already identified that I'm interested in Telnet. I see this is the IP address of my DVWA. It sees that port 23 is open and it's TCP, so that to me says Telnet. So it's taking my seeds, it's taking the seeds in the platform, it's done the scan, and then produced this entity. I get the details of it. I can see it's actually running Telnet. I can go into the scan setting. I've only ran it once there. Checks, you can actually see the checks that were run. So this is where we mentioned that it gets, you do have the potential to directly interact with entity. These are part of those. This will be different depending on the entity that's there, but it will see it. So in this case, expose FTP service. I clicked into there. I can see what it is, what it has done as part of that check there. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of things, but I want to point out in this case the discovery context. So there's a nice visual of what actually happened. So in this case, it took at the top here, working down, it took these two seeds. So this is my actual seed that I entered into the platform here. This was an unbounced artifact, but this was my actual seed. It actually went and reached out to my 3.88.58.37 IP address based on the DNS entry here, and then it conducted a port scan on the IP address, resulting in a response on port 23 for Telnet. That's important because depending on your attack surface and what you put in, this can get extremely complicated as far as how that entity was discovered, and being able to visually show somebody, especially senior leadership, can be really beneficial for that. So back to overall identities, you see on the left, you can filter by pretty much any type of attribute that was discovered as part of these entities. So host IP addresses, I can see I was IP addresses. I don't see any. We do have one email address that was pulled. This was associated to the augustshell.com suspended domain seed that we put in there, and you can filter out and go down to conduct all the analyst functions that we already talked about. So we're going here, add notes, share, email, dig into the threat intel piece, and then move on here. Moving on to the next broad category of information exposed to actual technologies. So going down from dashboard issues to entities, we've based on the collection and the seeds that we put in, we've identified the issues that were associated. We've got the entities that were identified based of it. Now we're getting to the actual technologies and software that are associated with those. This is important because we are concerned with how we look from a adversary's perspective. What assets are we putting? What do they see when they're looking at us? And that goes beyond just the hardware, because every time I make a software change, I potentially open up other vulnerabilities that may not exist. So continually scanning for these vulnerabilities is important for that. So to help narrow down the scope of this, you see there's a lot of duplicates. So Apache HTTP servers in there a couple times. That's because that's what was used for both of our web servers. It's kind of difficult to narrow down based on our network architecture to help, at least for me, to help kind of guide my analysis of this. So I'm going to filter by collections. And in this case, I'm going to just focus on the DVWA web server. And if I want to point out this is a good opportunity to point out the importance of selecting the workflows when you're initially establishing your collections, because without going too far down, you can see that based on my web application discovery workflow, I've this technology were found. So it's good, but potentially not complete. So because of the way that workflow works, I'm focused mostly on the actual application itself, going down through the HTML, in this case, the HTML folder structure for pages and otherwise. If I go through the actual discovery and assessment, you start to see other networking type technologies. So I say networking, it's not networking technologies, but those having to do with like the network layer, transport layer. So SSH, in this case, SSH, but in other more complex scenarios, you would see other things. So you start seeing, let's say you're doing a DNS server, you start seeing DNS ports open, vulnerabilities related to that type of thing. So really plan out your collection plan when you're creating these collections, and know what you're scanning for there to make sure you get good coverage. So having them all, I'm going to have them all up just to show this, and then I'll go ahead and pick Ubuntu. And what that does is if you notice, it pulls me back to entities. So depending on how I want to conduct my investigation or what I'm interested in, I can pivot back and forth between the tabs and really find out the genesis for what's going on. So in this case, if I was confused, let's just, for example, say I should not see this. I was not expecting a new Ubuntu system to be within my service. What is that? So when I click in this case, I can see, okay, there's the domain name that was assigned to it here, and issues that could be associated with that, and continue down my path for that. So how are we doing on time? And same as the other ones, I'll just point out here, you do have the ability to filter based on the labels that it's seen. Those labels are created based on what it has in the platform for that technology. You can customize this to some extent here, and filter based on that, on those attributes, to help you just get through your workflows. All right. And I think we're almost to the end of the basic overview of this. And I like to end on the insights page, because it's fun, and it's critical for us to stay down at that tactical operational level. And that's where we're really getting after and doing good work. But those that are in leadership positions, they need information too to help support us when we're conducting operations. They need metrics. They need easily digestible products to help help say all the good work that we're doing out there as practitioners. And one place that you can do that as far as your attack service management responsibilities is on this insights page. It looks sort of like the dashboard at the start on the first page, but you get a little bit more in the weeds of nice graphs and charts to help communicate what's going on here. Graph, prevalent technologies. There's pretty self-explanatory. One thing I will mention is you can use the API for GTI to pull out this data. If you have other platforms that you want to use to create these or to analyze the information coming through, but you do have the basic ability here. Earlier, before we started, I did generate the PDF version of this. This is basically what it would look like here. It's just a little bit nice. It's printer friendly and could be useful depending on what you're trying to get across to those that are interested for in that. So, all right, we'll go back to the dashboard. That sums up the platform. It was a little bit of a mix of, just trying to show the capabilities and a basic workflow of how it could be used. In this case, stood up 2 vulnerable web servers and saw what was there. So imagine in production and other environments where you have systems that are up and running and it's constantly changing. The admins and users don't have the time or aren't required to make get approval for some changes. Somebody fat fingers something, something that should be in a lab environment gets exposed somehow. Otherwise, if you have a properly tuned attack surface management capability like GTI, you will not only see that, but you'll be able to alert it to it, and then also be able to quickly find out how fast you should remediate it or take care of it in some manner there. So it is one of the funner modules of GTI, in my opinion, here, and it really does make the life of somebody that needs to manage your attack, your exposure, a lot easier. And then when you incorporate it along with the other available options in GTI into your security operations, it makes a big impact. So with that, I thank you for the time. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Brian, myself. I also work with Mike Baca. He's also a former Marine that we've done a bunch of stuff with, and we'd love to help you set this up, talk through any challenges that you're having, and just making sure you're secure and you're getting the value that you deserve. So thank you and have a good day.